Welcome, everybody, to the Discover Ignite podcast, episode 1. I am your host, Marcus Hemla. And today, what we are actually talking about here in episode 1, I'm actually excited to be starting a podcast. I do have the YouTube channel, which I've been running for a couple of years now, and now I'm branching off to start this podcast. So I am excited. I'm aiming towards hitting your mindset, optimizing it, and getting some perspective, right? Because these are the key elements that can help build you into the person that you want to be. And today I kind of wanted to start with this episode as being essentially where to start it, right? Like, how do you start the mindset to get to where you want to go, right? Because that's the biggest problem. And I think some of the biggest things I've always found throughout my life is that it's not always easy, right? A lot of times we neglect a lot of different things in our life, and we don't show gratitude to those things that we have, or those things that we have achieved, right? I think a lot of times we build up goals, we build up the objectives in our lives, and a lot of times when we reach those goals and objectives, right, they aren't quite what we thought they would be. And so ultimately, I think, there's been some research on this as well, that you can get PTSD from this, actually, because, you've built this up to some, glorified thing that once you reach to this point, that life will be so much better once you hit that point, right? And so when trying to look at it, right, you do have to realize that, yes, every journey that you go on, you're going to have to enjoy the journey, right? And it's hard to do that when a lot of times there's a lot of friction, right? When you come across friction, it's uncomfortable. People don't like friction. And until you become comfortable with the friction, right, you're going to realize that there are greater things on the other side of that friction, right? No matter how, small, minute your goal is, or big that goal is, there's always going to be friction, right? There's always going to be a barrier to entry to get those things that you want in life. And with that being said, right, I try to dive deep into why exactly people can't reach these things, because at one point I struggled with this. And so I dived back, I went down deep into my roots here, right? And I was trying to find what it was. And it wasn't just in my roots, right? I've gone through weight issues in my life, right? As a young kid, I was always picked on, always bullied, always fought as a young kid, and being overweight. As an adult, right? I battled with weight a lot of times. Been in great shape, right? Bodybuilder shape, lost it all, right? I neglected myself, lost it all, got injured, all kinds of issues. I came back. I'm better than ever, right? The biggest thing here is to understand that, when looking at these things, when you first start out, right, it's hard to picture yourself as that person, right? That person that you want to be. Now, take the image of who you ultimately want to be, right? What are the traits that that person has? Is that person a confident person? Does that person have money? Does that person have the relationship? Is that person, you can list off a bunch of different things here on what your ideal person would look like, who you want to become. And in doing this, you have to understand that, again, to find that visual picture, right? It's hard to find that. And for myself, when I first started, right, like I remember when I was 12, right? That was when, my parents allowed me to start working out, right? Like being overweight and stuff, I always struggled with this, and I always wanted to find that thing to help me lose weight, right? Like I tried to do like some dieting. Obviously I couldn't do very much, right? It was very restricted. I had parents, they wouldn't let me go on some crazy crash diet or something like that. But the biggest thing here is that for myself, what I did was I was able to weight lift, and that opened up a whole new perspective to me on what was possible. And from that point on, I wouldn't allow that to stop me, right? Like I realized through the pain, right, from watching the progression of my father. He battled through weight a lot during his life too, and I've seen him in great shape, and I've seen him in some really bad shape, right? And so in seeing that progression, for me, I realized that I knew what weightlifting could do, right? Just through watching my father. And so I was excited when I started working out. And so I started working out for a little while. Again, this is all brand new to me. And I started and I couldn't visualize myself as being muscular, right? Because I was not that kid. I was never that kid, right? I was always a plump kid. I always battled weight. Some points I got smaller than other times, but for the most time, I was always a pretty heavy set kid. I like food, right? I always battled with food. And so in battling this with myself, the biggest thing I found was that, trying to come to a point in my life where I could be that thing that I couldn't see. And that was one of the hardest things to do. And reason being is because you haven't visualized yourself as that person, right? You've experienced what you've experienced, right? It takes someone to be able to visualize being that person and realizing that, well, I haven't done it in the past, so how do I know that I could be that person? And it takes some getting out of your comfort zone to realize that you can become that person. And I can get on here and tell you all the time, you can become that person, right? You can become that person. If one man or woman can do it, you can do it too. So it's hard to actually visualize that person, but you have to realize that it is possible. Now, the thing is depending where you're coming from, right? The biggest problem here being is that what our mind likes to do is we need to understand that our mind is a predicting machine, right? It's trying to keep us out of danger. So it predicts, and it essentially has the DPD, right? So it has the destination, it has the path, and it has the duration. And in doing this, right, it tries to predict these things. And a lot of times, especially nowadays, right, we are always trying to get things fast, right? We want everything fast, we want everything overnight. We see all these people and what they're doing, and we're like, well, how come they have it and I don't have it either? And so we expect these things to happen overnight, right? We might dedicate a little bit of time, but we realize that we're not achieving these things. And so that whole, duration part of it, right? It starts getting on us like, well, I've done it for, a month, 2 months. I should see some results, but I'm not seeing anything. And this falls into the whole, unseen progress, right? You are making progress as long as you are executing every day on an objective, right? If you wrote out your goals and you know what your daily objective is, you realize that you are making progress, right? There is unseen progress there. And that's one of the big things I talk about a lot too, is the fact that, you have to document your journey, or else you won't see any of this unseen progress, especially when it comes to what I like to teach people about mindset and perspective, is that you have to document this, because you are not going to see it, right? You're not going to notice it until you step away from it. The mind is just like the body. You have to condition the mind to be able to work a certain way, right? It's like running a marathon, right? You have to practice to be able to get good at it. And it's the same with a mindset. It's the same with achieving those things that you want to achieve in life through mindset, right? And setting that up for success. And so in doing so, going back to our model of the DPD, right? So the duration, right? We should never, when the idea of the duration comes up, we should not let that bother us. What you ultimately want to focus on is the end goal, right? What is your end goal? Don't worry about what's going on during the duration, right? Or the path, right? The path is the other one, the P side of this, the DPD, right? So the P is the path. How do you get there? You have to realize that, step 1 through 5 cannot be figured out for you, right? There's a lot of different tools that can help you, which is what I teach, and they will get you to that destination, right? You have to realize that these tools have to be tweaked for your experiences and your perspective, because that's how you learn. That's how you build everything off of, is your perspective and your experiences. So in knowing that, what you need to do is focus on the destination, right? If path or duration come up in your mind, this is where self-awareness is extremely important in practicing this, right? As soon as you realize that thought of the duration and the path, right? The path seems like there's no possible way. I'm following step 1 through 5 and it's just not working. You have to realize, again, you have to tweak it, right? Don't be frustrated. I know it can get very frustrating, but you have to condition your mind to believe that you are still progressing because you are tracking your unseen progress, right? You have to log that way in some way, shape, or form, whether you write that down or whether you do some kind of audio recording, right, of your voice, or maybe you just do a log on YouTube or something, right? You open up accounts, you can record these stuff private, right? No one can ever see these things. And go on there and just record yourself, right? Do a daily log about where you're going, your progress. And this is also what's important is to do daily feedback loops, right? I've given this example before of a business, right? A business doesn't want to start out in January and then come in July and start looking at the books, right? Because they're going to realize that they start losing revenue after that first month. So ultimately what you want to do is cut that time back, right? The sooner you know, the better you can fix and tweak it. So this is why daily, going through your day at the end of the day and determining, have I met my daily objectives, right? I have those goals in mind. I have a daily objective in mind. Have I reached that daily objective, right? And the thing here to remember too is that you can be flexible. A lot of stuff is you have these goals and you have to realize that they have to be tweaked, right? Because it's not going to be the same, right? This is why path can be a real issue because we want things black and white when things are not black and white at all. The black and white path, tools help. Tools will help you get there. You need tools along your journey to get there. And it makes the process a lot smoother. It makes the understanding and the belief that the duration, right, or the destination that you will eventually get there, that you have to, but that's the whole statement with trust the process, right? This is where this comes in because you have to believe that it's going to happen. You're going to get to that destination. As long as you don't quit, you will get there, right? And as long as you are looking through new perspective, right? Because a lot of times, this is where perspective is huge. This is why I talked about perspective a lot as well, is the fact that new perspective can give you new insight and new options on how to achieve that end goal, right? This is what's important because going back to the visualization thing, right? You can't visualize yourself there. So you have to track your unseen progress to be able to get there, right? Log every day. Well, I did this, right? I'm trying to build my confidence. So in building my confidence, I need to realize that how I'm going to do that is realizing that the one thing I have ultimate control over is the decision I make, right? The decision you make every day is to execute on that daily task. If you execute that, that will build your confidence. It slowly compounds over days, weeks, months, and then years, right? And then you have that confidence that you thought you could never achieve, right? These things are, we have to understand that nothing is going to happen overnight. Nothing is an overnight success. And we have to get that out of our head. And, social media and all these things, right? You have to realize that what you're seeing is people at the finish line. You're not seeing the journey it took to get there, right? Like my journey to improve myself, right? It started way, way back many years ago, right? When I was a kid, I was trying to get out of being chubby, being shy. This little kid that didn't talk to anybody, right? That played video games, and that's all I did. And, I just wanted to lock myself in a corner and I was happy, right? And then I realized that by doing that, I isolate myself and I can't grow, right? I wasn't feeling alive. Yes, I was getting temporary satisfaction from the little things that I had, right? And some people may be okay with that. But you have to realize that ultimately, a lot of these different things, you're getting the dopamine hit, right? So every time whether that you get a dopamine hit from playing games, video games, or going on social media, right? Getting that notification, or maybe you have an eating disorder, right? Which is what I had. I've dealt with a bunch of different things that I've worked my way through them. Again, it took me baby steps. I had one goal, and that's what I did. I executed. I gave myself time, right? I had like a 6-month window. This is what I wanted to execute. And I totally focused on that one thing. And I executed on that for 6 months, right? Until it became the norm for me, right? Once you get this stuff into routine, you realize that it's so much easier to execute on, so much easier to see the progress, right? And to realize it just second nature. Once these things become second nature, then you start working on the next thing. And that's why I've been like creating a system to help you do this, right? Because you have to realize that it is slow progress. And even like Warren Buffett, right? He is, one of the greatest investors of all time. And how did he do it? He had a simple program. And the problem being is that it takes time, right? It takes time for that compounding, for that money to build. And it's the same thing with your efforts, right? It takes effort over time gives you those massive results, right? It's continued effort daily and ultimately getting to where you want to get, right? And so that's what's important. It's starting out. So when you're starting out, you won't see yourself, and it is again hard to picture. And this is why a lot of people will say, "Well, I don't see myself doing that," right? And so you're trying to close that gap, right? You need to eliminate the thought process. Again, this is where self-awareness comes in. Is you need to eliminate the process of thinking that you can't get there, right? You have to just believe that you can get there. It's just daily efforts, right? We're trying to break this down. I'm trying to break this down as simple as possible. So that way you realize that, okay, so I got that daily objective. What I'm going to do is just execute on that every day. And I'm going to take my control back, right? You need to take responsibility for that daily objective. You need to focus on that daily objective, right? You need to be selfish about that daily objective. And this is extremely important, right? Because I talk about this all the time, the fact that, we are more than willing to give the shirts off our back to other people, other friends and family, which is a fantastic thing. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. But we will not do the same for ourselves. We will not allow ourselves to execute that daily task, to reach the goal, to become that person that we want to become. And this is where it's extremely important. Because you want that daily objective. That should be your sole responsibility, is to execute on that thing. No matter what happens, right? You should always be aiming, strive to knock that objective out, whether it's for your health, whether it's for, your mental exercises. What you're trying to do, right, is to make sure that you take care of that and handle that, right? Maybe you're trying to learn something new. Maybe you want to learn how to learn, right? That's one of the big things that I think that I teach as well, is that you need to learn how to learn, so that way you become more effective, right? I'm all about leveraging the resources that you have, right? I came from a place where I didn't have a lot of resources, right? I was, again, working in a truck factory, cutting cardboard, thinking to myself that this is going to be the rest of my life, right? Maybe I'll get a management position that pays maybe $5 more than what I had. And I wasn't satisfied with that, but yet I had no resources. So what I did was I tried to find something that could help me gain resources. So I went into the military because of that reason. That would leverage me a skill. It would leverage me other benefits that I could leverage and get somewhere way better than what I had now, right? And so, but the thing is that some people may not understand that that is an option, right? Or maybe that isn't an option. There are other options out there. You should realize that by gaining any kind of perspective, that you have other options that are right underneath your nose that you're just not at all aware of. And being stuck and realizing that, man, life is just horrible, right? Maybe you're coming from a place where you're coming from a breakup, from a divorce, or maybe you got a horrible test score, right? You realize that I have lost myself, and how do I get myself back on track, right? So visualization is important, is to realize that you're not going to, because you haven't seen yourself before accomplish these things, that you are going to have to actually sit down in a quiet place and visualize the ideal person. You visualize yourself as that ideal person, right? What kind of characteristics do you have of yourself at this ideal level, right? Are you charismatic? Are you talkative, right? Are you courageous, right? Are you strong? Are you healthy, right? Are you all these different things, right? Can you talk, right, to a crowd of people, right? You have to visualize these things. And a lot of times, again, it's hard to visualize it, but you have to understand that your brain is encased in a skull, a dark skull, right? The only input it gets is what it sees, right? It interprets what it sees, right? So if you can project an image of yourself in that ideal state, right, your brain doesn't know the difference. Your brain is just going off of the signals that is being sent in. And if you can alter those signals, this is why visualization is so big, right? And there's a lot of research to back this. There was actually an experiment where a particular group of people, I believe they were actually working out their fingers. From what I was understanding, is that one person actually exercised their fingers, the other person did absolutely nothing, and then the third group, they just used visualization technique. And I believe just using the visualization technique in itself, right, it was like they were able to increase their finger strength, I think, by like 35%. Something I have to look up to validate that, but it was something actually I just overheard and realize that, visualization is a big thing. Visualization is something I have used, right? That was just a particular an experiment that was used to prove that visualization worked. But I know for a fact that I've used visualization in seeing the house, right? Seeing the car, seeing all these things that I wanted to achieve in my life, right? The degree, right? All these other different things. I visualized these things in my past, and I've been able to achieve them, right? As long as the idea that visualization is in the forefront of your memory, you start believing in it, you start seeing in it, you start becoming that person. This is why visualization is so strong. So what you thought you couldn't see before because you were looking in the past, you're stuck in the past of what you've experienced, you struggle with it, right? So you have to sit down and start inputting that ideal self of who you are, right? And a lot of different things, there's a lot of different things here you can use, right? You can use like vision boards and stuff. I've tried to use vision boards myself, but for me, what I found is worked best is to sit down and visualize myself as that ideal person and what, again, characteristics he has, right? Is he charismatic? Is he outgoing, which is something I've never been, right? And the more and more I do this, the more and more outgoing and chatty I've become, and that is something I've never been, right, in my life. I've always been very quiet, and if I was always taught essentially if you had nothing important to say, just don't say anything at all, right? And so for me, that's what I struggled with. And so I've overcome that by, again, doing these different things and doing visualization and going through these steps and again, shutting off the path and the duration, right? And realizing that I have to self-audit myself when these things are going on and realizing, this is one of the other biggest keys here is to realize that we can all grow, right? Ultimately, that's what I'm coming down to the fact is that we can grow. We are not fixed, right? So The Mindset by Carol Dweck is one of the best books on fixed and growth mindset. And in this book, right, it goes over different examples of what someone with a fixed mindset would say and what someone with a growth mindset would say. And so this is what's important to understand is that our brains are tremendous, right? This actually dives into some David Eagleman, which he's a neurologist. And, he talks about this stuff as well about, the brain is just a marvelous creature, right? We tend to forget how much our bodies can handle. Our bodies can handle tremendous amounts of stress. It can recover tremendously, right? And a good example, even David Eagleman used, right, is the fact that, you lose a limb, your brain just doesn't go dead from that limb, right? It uses that part of the brain and rewires it for some other function in your body, right? You have to realize that your body is consistently growing, right? It wants to grow, right? And we wonder why, we feel like life becomes hard, right? Because we're not pushing ourselves to grow. When you try to grow, you realize that you can grow, right? As long as you're making that daily effort, that you can start growing, you can start expanding, right? And getting out of that comfort zone. And that's one of the biggest things too, I always talk about is getting outside of that comfort zone, right? And pushing it a little bit, right? I'm not telling you if you're the shy person I was way back in like fifth grade, right? I'm not trying to put that person where I am now because there's no way that person could sit in front of a camera or on a podcast, right? And talk, right? There's no way. I would probably have 2 words and I wouldn't know what to say after that. Now I have talking points and I can just, shoot from the hip, right? Because the more I do this, the more fluid it becomes. And so you have to realize that you can grow, right? You can grow outside of that person that you see right to this day, right? And this again falls into a lot of other different things, right? We have beliefs that have been conditioned into us, right? Through our experiences, people may have told us that we may have hung on to and believe that we are. And so we've conditioned ourselves to believe that we are this person that everybody, what we see, what we think the world sees us as, right? And so, in that being said, the biggest thing here is to understand that we are more than just that. We can change the past by focusing on the present, our daily actions, knowing where we're supposed to go in the future, right? And this is also what is important, is that you should know where you're headed towards. You shouldn't just blindly go and say, hey, I'm just going to start trying to do self-improvement, right? I think a lot of people, when they're going on diets or doing any kind of self-improvement stuff, they do it, right? They only see it as a temporary thing. They try to apply a temporary patch to something that is more deep rooted and needs to be fixed, right? And it's the same with a mindset. All these things, they come down to basic things, right? Basic execution, basic thoughts. And it's breaking that down and realizing there's a basic framework here that works through everything. And doing that, you have to realize that you have to keep it simple. You have to realize that a lot of these things that you're trying to change or lifestyle changes, right? You have to get out of the old conditioning, right? It's that whole talk about, insanity, right? Is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, right? That's how we are conditioned to believe, right? Is that we live this way. And, sometimes, I totally understand trying to put forth effort to try to get to these things can be hard, right? Because you, again, are conditioned in a way. And you also have, your subconscious, right? You got to understand that your body is working against you doing these things. This is why I created the underdog experiment, right? On my YouTube channel, was because of the fact that, all the time you are fighting against your subconscious, right? You condition yourself to believe a certain way. Now you're trying to make a change. You're essentially going against yourself, right? You're going against your subconscious. And it's not saying that it's impossible to do. You can do it. And it takes little steps, little compounding efforts, again, will change all that stuff. And you realize that eventually you can get there, right? The more you spend time on these things, daily habits, right? We are so caught up in the now, right? We want it now. We want quick fixes, and we're quick to execute on those quick fixes and purchasing the next supplement or something in hopes that it'll get us there, and realizing that, if we can go to the root of the problem and fix it there, we're talking about real lifelong changes, right? If you can fix it at the root of the problem, these things will go away, and you won't need that temporary fix, right? You won't need all these other different things because you have a solid foundation. And that's what I'm trying to build is, the system of working through how you do that. And it starts with the ground floor, right? And this is what I would consider the ground floor, is to realizing again that visualization, is something you need to work on. You need to project what that ideal person is, right? You need to sit down and spend some time. You need to disconnect from social media. You need to disconnect from essentially any kind of input, right? You should be more self-aware of what's being brought in, right? Because we're tending to forget that, whether that's you're listening or you're on YouTube, right, is one of the biggest ones. When you see a person, this is an example I use all the time. When you see a person on YouTube, right, if it's not, a character, right, if I'm not a cartoon or if I am not daytime TV, right, you have to realize that we take off the filter, right? But when you see a person on here talking, right, you will put a filter on and you'll fact check them, right, until you gain trust, right? And sometimes that trust process takes a while. But nonetheless, if this was in a cartoon, right, and your filter comes off, right, maybe you still have that filter, but it's nowhere near where it would be if you saw, right, if you saw someone in person. But you always have that gauge. And this is natural, right, because you are trying to protect yourself. But with social media and the way everything is nowadays, right, the filter is off on a lot more, right? And we have a lot more input. We have a lot more data coming in. And so we're not filtering in that. We're not spending any time to put thought behind it. Are these beliefs, right? Are these things I really truly believe in? Why and why not, right? And do I believe in those, right? Do the beliefs I have, right? Because you have beliefs that you've been conditioned to this point, right? From your friends, your family, from all the years, the experiences that you've had, right? You've had these conditions that have brought you to where you are today, right? Do they still serve you? Do you find them conflicting, right? You find what you want in life, right? Are they still conflicting with that? And then you need to challenge those beliefs and remove beliefs, right? If they don't fill your need, you need to remove them. And so in saying that, right, you're looking, again, you're trying to make a change, right? And realize that you need to stop looking at other people's finish lines. You need to look at your own, right? Where is your ideal self, right? Where are you looking at? Where do you want to go, right? Where is that person at? And in making and realizing, well, how can I get there? And there's a big thing too, is you may not understand, right? Is not talking about so much path, right? Because you can mix this up with path very easily. But the thing is you still need to have a baseline of how to get there, right? This is where gaining perspective is important, and going out and researching perspective on these things. Because a lot of times we may think things are so far-fetched out of our reach, right? We look at the gap. Again, you look at that path, right? And that duration. You're looking about, okay, well, that just seems so far-fetched compared to where I am now. How am I supposed to get there, right? And a lot of times, if you just do some research on that and realize and stop trying to file, like the biggest one I like to bring up is just crash diets, right? Because people want that quick fix because they see the quick results and not realizing that's actually more damaging to your health, right? You realize that by the end of it, because you've cut out so much that you go right back to your old habits and you don't like it. So you want to fix that, right? And that's by doing, having small good habits that will help you correct that and allow yourself to actually make life changes that will last forever, right? And so that's what we're trying to build here. And so again, that visualization, it will again be hard, but you have to realize that you can't achieve these things. In realizing that we have a growth mindset, to gain that growth mindset, and in realizing that we are not fixed. We are not fixated. You don't come into this world having a skill set, right? We all have to learn how to walk. We have to learn how to speak, right? Learn how to condition your mind, right? Learn how to exercise so you can be in shape, right? You have to realize that all these things, all the information is there. You just have to execute and realize that it all starts with the mindset, right? If you want money or relationships or these things, which is something I talk about too, is because you have to realize with money and the relationships and all these things, right, is you have to go to the root of the problem. This goes back to where I was talking about with giving our shirts off our back to other people, but we neglect ourselves, right? You have to build yourself, right? You have to be a strong individual. You have to realize that sometimes if you are so far off and don't know who you are, you need to work on yourself, right? And it goes the same for money, right? We want to hit the lottery, right? But we save up money, we store it away, right? Yes, you should have some rainy day money, right? I believe in that, but the rest of the money should be investing in yourself. How can I leverage myself, right? What perspective do I need to realize that things are a lot easier, right? If you can find perspective, you leverage resources you have and get to greater leaps and bounds, right? In quicker fashion than the regular system, right? Of doing things the standard way. Yes, you're going to have to go against the grain. You're going to have to go, people may tell you that, what are you doing, right? You are going so far outside. I don't understand what you're doing, right? Why are you doing this kind of thing? And at that point, that goes into the whole thing with looking the landscape, right? Looking at your environment. Is your environment setting you up for success to execute on that daily task, right? And so you have to audit your environment as well. Your friends, your family, are people negative, speaking in your ear? You need to remove them. And if it is so far negative, then you really need to spend time to where you are by yourself and talking to yourself in a positive fashion, right? This is also important because this whole journey, right, you have to realize that all these little tools that I've been going through this whole podcast are tools you need to establish. And yes, you're going to have to establish them one at a time, execute them one at a time, to see how they work for you, right? And then you realize that they slowly connect to helping you create that runway of success, right? And that's ultimately what it is you are trying to pave the way in which you are successful. And so you have to audit your environment and remove those people and realize that and focus on myself. The input I am taking in, I have to eliminate all the social media. I have to eliminate news, right? I have to eliminate all these things. And then I need to talk to myself in a positive way, right? Because you have to realize that not only does the world, right, can have a bunch of negativity if you're not controlling your environment, you also have that voice in back of your head that's telling you, you don't need to go do this. Why do you need to do this, right? That's so much effort, right? So you have the negative voice that's always telling you what not to do, right? And giving you excuses on why you can't be there, right? And so that's something, even for myself, right, that I continue to work with, I continue to work around. You realize that it does get a lot easier, but it is still always there. But using the tools will help you get there and help you maintain that, right? And there's a lot of other tools I will show you guys further on that can help you maintain that, right? And stay motivated and do all these other things. But right now you need to focus on that visualization, right? Finding that person and realizing that from where you're standing at right now, yes, it's very hard to see because you haven't experienced it yet, right? You've never had that six-pack set of abs, so you don't know what that would look like on you, right? You never had that relationship, right? That ideal relationship, right? All these other different things. You never thought you could run a business, right? You never saw yourself doing that because you never experienced it, right? You do have to get over that sense of fear. And that in itself is another step you can take, right? Your daily task would be doing something small to build that sense of fear. Control your decision process, right? Every day I'm going to do something that's going to push my fear a little bit further out. And that's something you have to realize too with fear, is that fear is nowhere near as bad as we like to think it to be, right? We are afraid that we may be an imposter. We are afraid that, we might ruin something in our lives. You have to realize that aside from time, everything else can be fixed, right? Everything else, relationships, right? Relationships come and go. That's something that's a completely different thing, right? Relationships are temporary, right? But we have to always learn from those relationships. We have to always learn from what we're going through in life. But we have to realize that we're going to have to be our biggest hype man. We're going to have to be our best friend, right? We're going to have to be our cheerleader. We're going to have to push us through the tough times and allow ourselves to execute that daily task, right? Making sure that that's our sole objective every single day, and to pull us out. And if we're working on that fear factor and getting outside of our comfort zone a little bit each and every day, pretty soon you realize that one thing, right, talking with a person, right, that may have been something that was really fearful to you. Now it's easy. Now you find that you are gravitating more towards people and crowds, right, and talking to more people, or talking to someone randomly on a playground, right, or doing something like that, right? And so these are things you work on, right? And you realize that over time, these things will compound and they will add up. And then you realize that person that you never thought was possible is possible. Then you realize that, man, how much further can I go with this thing? And then you start really expanding, right? And the thing is to understand that you have to be continually pushing yourself forward, right? This is why continuing to try to grow, although it sounds tiring, right? You have to realize that it is not. You realize that you start finding this sense of purpose when doing this. And this all ties back to that time that, you couldn't picture yourself doing this. And now you're picturing yourself doing this. And then you wonder what the next thing is. And then you continue to grow and you continue to push. You want to see what you're capable of, right? You want to know, well, if I have one life, how far can I really take this thing? And so you really start pushing the boundaries, right? And you break away from the change of those beliefs, right, that you thought you never could achieve. And that one day, you will achieve that person and you will continue to grow into the next person. And then you will visualize, at that point, you realize man, I visualize my way to this point. Now I want to visualize my way to that point. And then the process continues. You push further and further, and you expand, and you're enjoying life, right? You're enjoying the journey because you've seen the progress that you've made. You've actually lived through the progress that you've made, right? And so this is what is phenomenal about this, is that once you get over these little hurdles and realizing that, man, you know what, I really can't do this. It's realizing that you can, right? You are looking at the finish line when you haven't even begun. And it's just breaking it down into the smaller things that can help you get there. Because once you're there, then it becomes easy. You have to get in motion. Once you start getting in motion, right, it's easier to push the ball further down the road. It's easy to compile that amount of effort that you're putting into it, right? And then once those things you thought were very hard, they become easy. They become the norm. They become your new norm, right? And so a lot of times I think we are afraid of what we'll lose now. But when in fact, a lot of times where we find ourselves is we're not happy in the now, right? We may have things that make us happy, right? Temporarily, right? Maybe it's the football game on Sunday that makes us happy. Maybe it's just, having pizza every Friday night. That makes me happy, right? But it doesn't solve anything. It doesn't help you find your motivation. It doesn't help you want to achieve bigger and better things in your life, right? Incorporate bigger and better things, live through bigger and better experiences, right? Because I think ultimately that's what it is living through an experience, right? You are living the human experience. How far can you take this experience? Are you satisfied with where you're at? A lot of times we are not satisfied where we're at, right? And we find ourselves purchasing things that are temporary solutions, right? And not a fix to the root of the problem. That it all starts back with the mindset, with the daily execution, with yourself, and realizing that you too can achieve this.